So the idea of voting for Joe Biden is laughable to me, in my personal opinion. So I was sending off some tweets this morning because I saw why I'm not voting for trending, and I sent like three or four of them, and then I realized I'm like, man, Joe Biden is such a bad candidate. I can go all day. I can go all day with tweets about why I'm not voting for Joe Biden. So I think it would be a little bit more um, organized to shoot it in video form, just so I can kind of lay it out. And I think the reason why I'm not voting for Joe Biden is kind of similar to why other people are not voting for Joe Biden, I would think, right? So before every election, I always have my lines of litmus tests and candidates that I would vote for and would not vote for. In the beginning of 2016, my litmus test was I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. Fuck that. There's no way that's happening. I ended up voting for Joe Stein in 2016, but I discovered Bernie Sanders that election, and I made my mind up that I wasn't voting for Hillary even before I knew who Bernie was, because my hatred for the establishment runs deep. Um, so when you look at this election, 2020, for example, there was a few candidates I could have voted for at the end of the day, but there was easily four of them. Let's go with four. Just keep it simple. That there was quite literally no way I would have voted for them. Um, Three of those I had my mind made up before the election, and then the other one I made my mind up because he was so bad during the course of the campaign. So my list was Michael Bloomberg, Amy Klobuchar, and Joe Biden. And then Pete Buttigieg was added to that list as the campaign developed. Um, Also, since I'm doing people I added later on in the campaign, Elizabeth Warren, um, someone I would never vote for. Actually, I'm very looking forward towards her primary opponent in 2014. So those candidates, I'm gonna stick with Bloomberg, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, because Warren, I didn't vote for her because she just fucked up tremendously. But with those four, you had a snowball chance of hell of winning me over in the first place. And that's not even before I even get to my policy litmus test. Because with Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, and Amy Klobuchar, their records are so bad that there's not much that they could have done to convince me to vote for them, right? Amy Klobuchar had it was the NAACP and Black Lives Matter in her area that asked her to drop out because her attorney uh, general record was atrocious for towards the African American community. She was a hardcore centrist, but and I do give her credit because she was a little bit more open than a lot of other centrists. She wasn't much of a liar. She just told people that I'm not passing your bills. I don't care how many lives that Medicare for All will save. I don't care how much canceling student loan debt would um, boost the economy. She was just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So speaking of policies, I had uh, five primary policies that was untouchable for me. Right, that only way I can get you can get my vote is if you endorse these policies. The first one, obviously, is Medicare for all, and Medicare for all is such a powerful litmus test that if you don't support Medicare for all, despite the studies that show it boosts the economies, it will save 68,000 lives per year. How can I trust your judgment overall? There's no way I can trust your judgment if you can't even get on a slam dunk policy like Medicare for all. Especially considering that it's a political slam dunk as well, considering that the majority of the Democrats, I think it was like 80% Democrats support Medicare for all, and then you have vast majority of independents. And during the exit polls for this election, you see that both Democrats and Independents largely supported Medicare for all. So it's a political slam dunk, a moral slam dunk, and an economic slam dunk. So if you don't support Medicare for all, um, there's no chance I'm gonna vote for you. So I could end the video just right there because our current nominee right now, Joe Biden, is strongly against Medicare for all during a pandemic. And not only is he against Medicare for all, he said if the House and Senate does all his work for him, get the Medicare for all bill passed, and it goes to his desk, well, he don't have to do anything. He doesn't have to do anything. Joe Biden said he would still veto that bill. So, man, even before I got past my first policy platform, Joe Biden is already disqualified. So, we also have cancel student loan debt. I think that's a big litmus test. But honestly, Joe Biden said he's looking into doing that now. But once again, if you don't support Medicare for all, and with your record, how can I trust you on anything? For one, okay. Free public college and tuition free college. Well, once again, I think Joe Biden has come around to this. But when you look at his record with the bankruptcy bill, how can I trust him to actually push towards student loan cancellation? How can I be convinced that Joe Biden will look for usury reform when he is bought and paid for by the credit card companies, right? Another big litmus test is a living wage that is tied to inflation. Now, I think Joe Biden is doing a little bit better on this one, but once again, I don't trust him because during the Obama administration, they didn't do anything to increase the minimum wage. So he's saying the things that he has to say now. But once again, Bernie Sanders was my compromise candidate. According to Rashida Tlaib, um, and it makes sense just based on the policy, having a living wage tied to inflation means that the $15 an hour asking point was the starting point. You realize the fight for 15, that was like 10 years ago. So if you're looking at the inflation now, the minimum wage should be around $20 an hour. Fight me on that. If I ever run, that's what I'm running on. Because when I say living wage tied to inflation, I really mean living wage tied to inflation. And so let's get to the last two policies that are my litmus test. You have um, ending the wars as well, which I'm gonna touch base on a little bit because this is another reason why Joe Biden is such a non-starter for me, because his foreign policy track record is, man, it's horrendous. It's horrendous to say the least. So I grew up and I was radicalized by the George Bush administration, right? And one thing that played a big role in my consideration who I consider for candidates is, will you fight the military industrial complex? Will you end the wars? And this is a pledge I made years ago. Once again, before I even knew who Bernie Sanders was. I did a lot of research into the Iraq War. I learned about the civilian death counts. I learned about the torture. Um, and I made my mind up a long time ago that I would never ever vote for anyone who supported the Iraq War. Period. That's a non-starter because a minimum estimate was 200,000 dead civilians. And I always talk about this, and that's the minimum low number because the number should be around 1 million. But the Pentagon and the U.S. government doesn't want it to sound that bad, so they mark civilians as combatants if they don't want them to count on their civilian death toll. And knowing that, the war in Iraq completely destabilized the Middle East. That's a whole nother video in its own stuff. But how can you possibly vote for someone who not only voted for that, but was a strong advocate in the Iraq War and Joe Biden? You had people like Barbara Lee and Bernie Sanders and a lot of other progressive members who was fighting against the Iraq War, and they saw through George Bush's lies. So once again, it's a big question of judgment for Joe Biden because if he was tricked by the Iraq War, he's going to be tricked by the next war that the military-industrial complex want to push for. And you have something else that is not talked about enough, right? There was a report that came out last year that showed that multiple administrations lied about the Afghanistan war. It spanned three administrations, going through the Trump administration, the Barack Obama administration, and the George Bush administration. And you have Vice President Biden part of administration that was caught lying about the Afghanistan war. And this report was saying pretty much how generals was constantly lying to the public. The administration officials was giving false information about how the war is going well, for example, but they had no idea what they was doing. It was a great report, and I'm gonna link it in the comment below because once again, this alone would be a deal breaker for me. I mean, I guess I'm radicalized. That I expect our government to be honest and not engage in illegal wars. But if you look at how the Afghanistan war was consistently lied about, I think that should be 100% legal, right? So, and then finally, my last litmus test, because that's touched over foreign policy and why Joe Biden is so horrific on foreign policy. Actually, I do want to mention one more thing because I mentioned this before in my other video. The reason why I'm fearful of Joe Biden is because obviously his brain is completely broken. He got massive dementia. So if he finds a way to win and they carry him over the finish line, 100% his administration will be ran by the Democratic swamp. And the Democratic swamp are the warmongers that was supporting the coup in Bolivia, supporting the coup in Venezuela. And these are the same Democratic swamp creatures who voted for Donald Trump's massive military budget. So, once again, where's the resistance? Where's the difference between the two parties on foreign policy? There is no difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party on foreign policy now. And it's shameful to say that, and now that we know we won't actually have a leader in the White House being Joe Biden, we will have a lot of people that from the Democratic swamp that will influence him. For example, people like Amy Klobuchar, people like Elizabeth Warren, who voted for Trump's massive military budgets. A lot of people. This is one thing you know for a damn fact. You know for a fact that they will not take someone who voted against Trump military budgets. You know for a fact that they won't have someone who opposed the Iraq and the Venezuelan Bolivia coup as a part of their foreign policy team. It's not going to happen. It's going to be the most hardlining warmongers in the Democratic Party that will be in charge of that administration, which is terrifying for not only me, but it should be terrifying for everyone in the world because, man, just thinking about what they'll be up to in 8 years with complete media compliance um, and no pushback from the left. Well, I should say liberals, because liberals will not push back on a Joe Biden administration, just like they didn't push back on a Barack Obama administration, right? So, man, I can talk about foreign policy all day because unlike a lot of voters, I wasn't convinced that foreign policy wasn't important. That's something I liked about Tulsi's original campaign at first because she talked about endless war and foreign policy, but she ended up being a massive disappointment at the end. Finally, my final policy litmus test was a Green New Deal, right? So at the end of the day, whether Joe Biden wins or Donald Trump wins, it doesn't. We're already fucked, right? Because you either believe in the climate scientists or you don't. It's really that simple. You either believe in the climate scientists or you don't. And Joe Biden had an F rating for the Sunrise Movement because of the climate plan. And I saw a lot of liberals complain about Joe Biden getting an F rating for his climate plan. They thought it was too divisive, especially compared to Trump. And you can tell that those people didn't read the Sunrise Movement breakdown and why they graded Joe Biden as an F. Trust me, I read it. Well, for one, and what should be a non-starter is Joe Biden's a fracker. Joe Biden working in an administration that pushed for Arctic drilling. But not only that, that's failing in one category, and that's his record and his push towards eliminating emissions. But what they was grading on is your plan to get to lower emissions as well, and the urgency of your plan. I repeat, they was grading on the urgency of your plan. So Joe Biden's plan was not urgent enough. His record against fighting against climate change was not good enough. His plan alone was not good enough. That's why he failed. And that's why if Joe Biden administration goes forward, we're gonna be fucked on climate change, whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Because if you look at the people that donate to Joe Biden's campaign, it's big oil, big gas companies that's funding his campaign, that's giving him a ton of money. And do you think these people will have a change of heart out of nowhere? Hell no. They're not having a change of heart on climate change. So whether you vote for Joe Biden or you vote for Donald Trump, our climate is fucked and we're fucked because our chance to really save the planet was all about this election, and it was all about getting Bernie Sanders elected, which unfortunately we was not able to do, right? So, and you guys probably noticed something, at least especially a lot of my followers. This video about 15 plus minutes now. I gave a substantial policy based reason on why I'm not voting for Joe Biden. You know what I didn't mention? Which something I tweet about a lot. I didn't mention Tara Reid. So even if Joe Biden was a great politician and he didn't have these policies issues that I had with him, I'm not voting for a rapist. Tara Reid just today filed a police report for Biden, and I find it super hilarious because I'm always looking at responses for liberals. So before Bernie Sanders dropped out, they said that Tara Reid is not to be trusted because she's just a Bernie bro trying to help Bernie cross the finish line, which isn't true. She was a Elizabeth Warren supporter to start off with, so that's not true. But now that Bernie dropped out, she filed a police report, and they say, "Hey, why is she filing a police report now that Bernie Sanders dropped out? She's trying to help Trump. She's a Russian bot." Bro, you can't have it both ways. Before Bernie dropped out, she wasn't to be trusted, and now after Bernie dropped out, she's trying to help Trump. So liberals are deeply unserious people. They are morally bankrupt people, and you can tell that their whole stance of believing women was just an act of political cowardice and weaponizing sexual harassment claims. So that's something else I just got to drop. I believe in Tara Reid just the same way I believed in Christine Blasey Ford. Because if you believed in one and not the other, it's time for you to admit you're a political hack. Straight up. I believed in both because I understand that people in power, there's a very stark power dynamic there that make it hard for women to come out. Pretty much all the things I was saying to defend Christine Blasey Ford a few years ago, I'm using for Tara Reid now. So I see a lot of liberals using the same talking points the right wing was using to slander Christine Blasey Ford, to slander Tara Reid. So once again, blue MAGA versus red MAGA. I'm not choosing one. I'm not choosing the other. Straight up. So knowing that, in the face of activism, in the face of protesting, Joe Biden told activists not to vote for him. There was an immigration activist that challenged Joe Biden on his record on immigration and Obama's record on immigration. And he wasn't even rude, man. He straight up just said, we want you to say that you won't deport people like you did back in the past. And Joe Biden turned his back to him and told him to vote for Trump. And that is the one that pissed me off the most. There's constant examples of him telling voters to vote for Trump on the campaign trail. So Democrats should be lucky that I'm not following Joe Biden's advice. I'm just gonna vote for Howie Hawkins, the Green Party, because this is my theory in 16, and I'll keep this theory to this day. If you, it's not even just my theory. I'm gonna say I didn't make it up. The more you vote for the lesser of two evils, the further the country will shift to the right. And my argument for people who believe voting for lesser to evil works because one thing that was always repeated by, um, it was kind of neoliberal fan fiction. They would tell us that if you vote for lesser blue no of evils, you vote blue. That's a better chance of you getting your progressive policy passed. And for the life of me, I would love to hear an example of that happening because I'd never heard it happening before. Never seen it happening before. So our only way to push the party left is to vote for the Green Party. So imagine if there's a massive push for the Green Party and the Green Party gets a massive result. Let's say Green Party get 5%, right? And then let's say Joe Biden loses by 5%. Now that tells the political establishment that there is a significant amount of voters that you have to go get. So if you're a progressive and you're giving your vote to Joe Biden, you just gave away your entire leverage. And you are not going to put Joe Biden on the left on any of these issues because ask the left wing activists how successful they was managed in getting Obama to go left. He did not. He doubled down on trickle down economic policies, his warmongering, in his second term. So our plan not only does propping up the Green Party send the message to the Democratic Party that there's a voter base that is willing to be captured, it breaks the two-party duopoly because the two-party system is fucking trash and the two-party system only exists to preserve power. So that's another giant reason. So I always implore Bernie supporters. I know if it will feel great to write Bernie in. But just please take pride in your vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary. Bernie Sanders is still on the ballot. He needs as many delegates as possible. So vote for him. Take pride in that vote. But the establishment would love nothing more than for you to honestly, just throw away your vote by writing him in where that doesn't count for a lot of states. So I vote in Green Party. I'm voting for Harry Hawkins. His platform is further left than Bernie. And this something I went in with. I know this is a very long video. I went in with this. Bernie Sanders was the compromise candidate. I remind you, I was not planning on voting for Hillary in 2016, even before I knew who Bernie Sanders was. I wasn't voting for Biden, even if Bernie Sanders didn't run this time around. Bernie Sanders is my center right. He is about as far right as I'm willing to personally go. Because if you think I'm disheartened by this election, that I'm gonna give up fighting for my ideas, hell no. I'm gonna double down, bro. I'm about to be even more far left now. Bernie Sanders was just a start, man. From now on, the Democratic Party has to fight a two-front war, and there was a lot of criticism I had of Bernie Sanders. I wanted legalizing all drugs. I wanted UBI. I wanted a hardcore, unapologetic, anti-imperialist that would call out the parties on their warmongering. Which Bernie had much improved foreign policy this time around, but he didn't call out the Democratic establishment for pushing Russiagate. He didn't defend Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning the way he's supposed to. He didn't defend Edward Snowden the way he's supposed to. So that's my ideal candidate, right? Bernie Sanders was an amazing leader. I had nothing but respect and admiration for him. He is my role model and all that. But the idea of voting for Joe Biden is laughable because Bernie Sanders was my compromise. So this is why I hashtag won't vote for Joe Biden. And I gotta kind of cut this off because I'm at like 20 plus minutes. But I can go all day, guys. I can go all day. The idea of voting for Biden is laughable. If you're a progressive voting for Joe Biden, I'm sorry to voter chain, but I guess you gotta vote your conscience at the end of the day, but you're a sucker. I'm sorry. Straight up sorry. There will be a lot of progressive leaders, a lot of progressive people in media, a lot of people running for office, a lot of people in office that will try to sell us on Joe Biden. They need to do that for their career. I get it. I understand. It's tough. It's tough. It's heartbreaking at the same time that we don't have progressive that's willing to not give a fuck. But it's tough. I get it. But I'll politely decline. And I gave you 24 minutes why.